Hi everyone, I'm Khadija and I'll be the MC for this session. I welcome you all to this session titled Interesting, Easy, or Hard, How I Have Sought to Prioritize Work. And the speaker for this session is Mr. Ola Akinloluwa. To briefly introduce Mr. Ola to you, Mr. Olaoluwa is a global health security specialist working to build international health regulation core capacities in key technical areas such as surveillance, biosecurity, point of entry, and border security. He currently works at IQVIA as part of the Middle East and Africa Public Health Practice Team. So, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Ola to the stage.
So my name is Olaoluwa Akinloluwa, as she has said. And the other thing that you need to know about me is that I am conceited enough to feel that I can give this kind of talk. So before I start, I'd like to establish what I want to get out of this, or what I hope we achieve with this. The first is that I want to use this session to walk through, to do some kind of self-therapy session, to walk through how I've tried to make decisions about the kind of work I've done over the last decade and few years. I've always been driven by, or I've always liked to think I've been driven by thinking that the work I do should have some kind of impact, and I've always tried to make decisions along that line. So I'll try to use this to try to walk myself through that process. The second objective here is that I hope that I'm able to inspire you to begin thinking about that. Also, I think more than anywhere in the world, those of us in Nigeria here need to think very carefully about the kind of, how impactful the kind of work we do is. That's the two objectives I hope to achieve. I also hope to help you see the broad, or how broad the area of work can be in general global health security and pandemic preparedness, or public health emergency preparedness, which is most of what I've spent the past decade doing. I'll talk briefly about that. But before I start, two caveats very quickly. The first is that although I work in IQVIA, like she mentioned, I'm a senior consultant working in the public health practice for IQVIA. I'm not here to talk about IQVIA, and I'm not here on behalf of IQVIA. I'm here to just talk about my journey and how I've sought to prioritize the work I've done. The second caveat is that I have been rather privileged, and the idea of how do you prioritize the kind of work you do is an idea that is rooted in some kind of privilege. You need to have the privilege of the options of doing multiple things before you can decide that, oh, I'd rather do this because I'm curious about it, or rather do this because I think it would make the most difference in this course area, or rather do this because I think, it's make the most impact, etc. So, but I have had that privilege, and I'm talking from a place of privilege, and I acknowledge that. But that privilege also leads me to be able to, lead us through exploring this. I know some of us at the very beginning of our career, like me, just starting out, and we'll be faced with these decisions and choices in the future. And I just want to be able to give us a baseline to work with. So basically, we have limited attention and time. I, like most Nigerians, I often have like one or two, three other things that I'm involved in. But ultimately, we have very limited time and resources and limited attention. And we need to make a decision often about what to pursue and what to let go of. I've often tried to use this framework or just make the decision around three key things. Is it interesting enough for me to do? If what I'm doing is not something I'm curious about, if it's not something I think is interesting enough, I find it hard to work in it at all, right? And also, is it something that is tractable? Is there a clear line between the problem and a proven solution? And I think one of the ethos, one of the key pillars of the ways of thinking of effective altruism is that the solutions you try to work on should be either proven solution or you should be working on gathering evidence that this is a proven solution. Which is why, of course, the theory of change is at the core of the way you think about approaching work. And the last bit is about how challenging the work is, how difficult it is. One of the biggest problems I have with, well, one of the ways I've thought about development generally is that a lot of development initiative shy away from the really difficult problems. And I mean, that's for a lot of reasons. We'll discuss those reasons very carefully soon. But I've found that I've found myself drawn to attempting to do this or taking on these difficult challenges. I think most of the time people need something they can dedicate themselves to, like a mission that they would attempt to solve. And that kind of mission sometimes is what drives innovation and impact. So very quickly, let me just talk about how. So the first thing is I found myself generally more productive when I do things that I'm interested in. I have earlier on in my career, I wanted to be a lecturer. I loved the academics. I hated anything that had like too much structure, or well, I thought I did, and I thought that from what I saw, the little I saw of academics in Nigeria, it was more unstructured, and I liked that idea. But very quickly, when I left school, and I already actually started, I already had an admission to go do my master's and start some kind of assistantship in the school I finished. But I got a job, and I had to make a decision whether to continue down the road to school or to take on this job. I took on that job largely because I was curious about what it presented. It was a job to bring on private hospitals to conduct PMTCT tests and enroll pregnant women who are positive for HIV on ARVs somewhere in central Nigeria, Abuja, Nasarawa, etc. Traditionally, most of these programs are run in public tertiary institutions and primary healthcare centers, and private hospitals are excluded, although a large number of pregnant women actually use private facilities. So it was the first time, in fact, in Nigeria where they were made an attempt to do this. Because most of the services that have been offered were free. The ARVs were meant to be free, the tests were meant to be free. It was a little bit difficult to figure out how to ensure that private hospitals that do fee-for-service services would offer these things for free. So we took on that challenge, and I stayed on there because, for the most part, I loved the challenge. After a while, I after about 2, 3 years. And by the end of 3 years, I'd left that particular project. I was back in Kano working on a Bill and Melinda Gates funded project to solve the vaccine supply chain problems in Kano. I think for the most part, I became really disillusioned and bored, maybe, with the work I was doing. So I quit. In any case, generally, when I do things that when I do things that I'm not interested in, that I find that I'm not curious about, that I don't have a deep passion for, I quickly become unproductive, and well, I become less impactful. So the first thing for me here is whenever I want to choose something I want to do, I mean, it can be something that is highly impactful, that is very interesting, but if it isn't something that I am deeply, deeply passionate about and deeply, deeply curious about and deeply, deeply interested in, I often lose steam very quickly. And this might be less a strategy and more a character defect, but it is up to you to think about that when you make a similar decision. When I left that firm, I did a couple of things, and most of the last 10 years or thereabouts, I've spent working in the health security space. And in that period, I have had quite a number of opportunities to do a few other things, but for some reason I have remained there in that space for this long, largely because I am deeply, 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 deeply fascinated and passionate about that space. The first piece of work I did in health security was immediately after Ebola in 2014. We had an Ebola outbreak in West Africa, a rather devastating outbreak that started somewhere in Guinea. Then Liberia and Sierra Leone were impacted, and most of West Africa was impacted. I remember listening to a podcast in which Tom Frieden, the former CDC director, he was asked what was the biggest moment of his career as the director of CDC. And he said it was when the 2014 Ebola outbreak happened and a case was detected in Lagos, Nigeria, because of how densely populated Lagos is. That particular incident represented one of the potential for the worst public health crisis in a while. And so immediately after that outbreak, there was a lot of work. So I started working with at points of entries. If you remember the story very well, the Lagos airport was where Patrick Sawyer walked into the country from, and I think he collapsed and was taken to a hospital. And that particular incident highlighted the fact that there needs to be a lot of health security capacities built around points of entry. And when we started out doing that work, there was more or less nothing structurally, and in the literature in that space. Most of the work around points of entry was work that was being done afresh. And that was the kind of thing that I was passionate about. We built emergency contingency plans, which were like coordination mechanisms for all the guys that work at airports, seaports, land borders to rally around and respond to an outbreak when it happens. Those contingency plans were, for the most part, like a new thing across the world. I think the oldest was probably 3 to 5 years old by the time we were building the one for Lagos. And so I was fascinated by this novel work, and that kept me on for a long time. I went on from that to do some other multilateral work. Following the Ebola outbreak, Nigeria and a number of countries in West Africa got together to agree a set of multilateral principles around information sharing when there's an outbreak and around collaborating in the events of an outbreak like Ebola that affects the region. And that work has been going on for close to 10 years. I think there was a breakthrough recently, about 2 years ago. And Nigeria also, I led the process to get Nigeria to set up some kind of multilateral agreement with its neighbors, with Niger, Cameroon, Benin. I'm seduced by that. But there's a lot of those kind of stories I can tell where I was driven largely by what I could do, by what I'm fascinated by. But in 2015, I had 2 projects that I was pursuing. One of them was called the Saraba Literary Trust. My friend, 2 of my friends set up a literary magazine. I don't know if anyone is in the literary space here, but you might have heard of a now defunct magazine called the Saraba Literary Trust. Basically just published short stories and poems and nonfiction. And well, I like to think that I am a writer. So I approached them and said, you know what, I can help with this. I can find a way to make this bigger and better. At the same time, by the way, I had an idea together with a friend to set up a series of community libraries, starting in starting in Abuja here. And we had made some progress with these community libraries. We had identified a couple of communities that have offered to give, a block or a classroom in their community primary schools. And there was some traction with this. But I believe that the fact that the Saraba Literary Trust thing seemed way more interesting to me, largely because maybe I had more traction there. We got some funding from some UK agency, and we ran a competition, a manuscript competition, and somehow the idea to set up a library fell by the way. And I think, in looking back, that's one of my big regrets, because I believe that setting up that idea, that communal space for children and young people to find a space to both read and a safe space from the world generally, is very impactful work. And personally, I grew up in Kano. One of the things that helped me, that shaped me for the most part, was a library in Kano that was, not close to my house, but that I went to nearly on a daily basis. The ability to access that much resources for free anytime I wanted, I think went a long way to setting me on the path that I am in. And I think the idea that I prioritized this because it seemed more cool and more interesting than that is one of the things I have come to regret. So the next is, one of the key tenets of development generally, not just in the EA space, but generally, is that people would rather put money in solutions that are proven, right? If you have a proven solution, or you have a clear theory of change that says that this problem has a clear solution, and all we need is to put money in the logistics of it to scale it. A lot of people would fund that. People are unwilling to fund things that don't have a clear road a clear solution and a proven solution. And I think Nigeria doesn't have a shortage of this. We have we have 1,001 areas where one can work in health, in education, in economic empowerment that can drive impact, given the situation the country is. And often it's often in this way, looking for a proven solution and committing to it to scale. It's often in this way that you have the most impact with the least resources, most efficiently. And the story I told you, the idea of Book Up, is an example of a easy and tractable problem that I somehow failed to bring to life. Probably because I prioritized wrongly. Nigeria has one of the worst cases of out-of-school children and worst indices around education. And I believe making decisions about clear solutions like this and delivering them is one of the ways in which you can be impactful. One of the things that I have, one of the ideas I've come across in the past few years is that a few people think there are certain problems that are relatively the easy problems of development, say distributing mosquito nets or something like that. They are easy not because it's easy to do, they are easy because there is already a solution, right? And all you need to do is scale. The harder problems are problems that don't have a clear solution as yet, where often at the outset of your project, you have no idea what you're going to find. And you probably don't even have, for a lot of years of work, you don't have a clear metric to show impact. One of those problems for Nigeria, for instance, is how to make civil service work, or how to make, civil service and public service work. One of the things I've had to do during my time working with the Ministry of Health was try to make a portion of civil service work. And so I'll try to tell you a story about something we did, and to try to, just inspire you about how to think around that. A key feature of these hard problems of development is that they often have a very high failure rate. So people are unlikely to want to fund them. You often only ever do them because you probably are doing them as part of a program. So I worked with a unit in the Federal Ministry of Health called Port Health Services. Historically, that unit is like it's the dumping ground of all the people who are not considered very useful in the Federal Ministry of Health. And if you've worked with the civil service before, you know that in the civil service, because of the way it's structured, there are quite a number of people who are just there to coast, right? They just show up, sign in, then they sign out. And so in that unit of the Federal Ministry of Health, there were like a lot of those kind of people. And a number of development partners have worked with that unit and found it very hard to be impactful. And so what we did over the period of about 5 years was when a new person is transferred to that unit, often what happens is when someone ambitious, someone willing to work, is moved to those units, they immediately move themselves out because they realize where they are. They realize their colleagues are not very serious people, so they immediately move themselves out somewhere where they can work. So what we did was, for every new cohort of people they bring in there, we designed a mentorship program. And we put them through a 6-month mentorship program, had a curriculum for training, and tried to show them what was possible with the work they are doing and the impact that they can make. And over the past 3 years, the success rate, well, I mean, for the number of people we put through the mentorship program, a lot of them fell by the wayside, but a few of them have grown to become so impactful. Currently, Nigeria is part of the intergovernmental negotiating body, negotiating the pandemic accord in Geneva, and the person leading that negotiation on behalf of Nigeria was someone who joined the ministry about 5 years ago, who went through that mentorship program. And that story and a number of other stories in the people who went through that cohort, it's not a story I can show. It's not a research evidence of how mentorship or how the mentorship program we did can help civil service. It's basically for the N involved, it's basically anecdotal, but it's an evidence of the fact that there's certain kind of very hard work that needs to be done, that is not being funded, that people are not paying attention to, that can really drive impact in government. And I'll just close by saying this, that I think one of the best ways to move things forward for Nigeria is to look for these very challenging, difficult tasks. I think there's no shortage of people working to scale proven solutions. Look for challenging tasks that are, or at least I will try to look for challenging tasks that are interesting enough to keep you focused and keep you burning the midnight candle, and try to do them. I hope I have not bored you. If I have, I am very sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ola, for your, we're not done, for your wonderful presentation. Please let's give him a bigger round of applause, please. So now we're gonna have the question and answer session, and due to time constraint, we're gonna take only one question.
Thank you very much, sir, for such an impactful presentation. Sir, you talked about passion and how it positively affected you. So the question is, how would you advise someone who is still navigating to find his passion? How would you advise someone like that? Thank you.
How I would advise someone looking for...
Passion.
I honestly do not have much of a framework for what drives me, but I think, I've been mostly, I think when you look around you, as a Nigerian, in fact, when you look around you, there's no shortage of things that make you worry. I have a tendency to worry, and I think the things that move you the most are probably the things that you should pursue. And as a human being, you can always have multiple passion. Like I mentioned, I am passionate about literature. I like to write, I like to review, I like to, work in literature. I'm passionate about teaching. I like to teach in all ways. And I'm passionate about a bunch of other things. I ended up doing a lot of things that are very different from that. And each time I come across a new thing, I try to figure out whether this is, and I'm getting better at that now, figure out whether this is something that is tractable, this is something that is worth my time, is this something that is impactful. Now I know to spend way less time on things that I like, that I'm passionate about, but that I think will probably be just, cosmetic courses or cosmetic things to spend my time on. But I imagine that passions are unique to individuals because we are very different as individuals. But once you find something like that you worry about, that you think you're fascinated with, the next step is to then apply a framework to see if pursuing it is something that would be impactful and a fair way to use your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ola, for your insightful presentation. Please give him another round of applause as he steps down. So thank you all for your active participation. And with this, we have come to the end of this session.